The courtroom buzzed with tension. Officer Kyle Decker stood rigid, his face pale, as Judge Hamilton glared down at him from the bench. Across the room, Jade Bennett sat calmly, hands folded, eyes sharp. "Officer Decker," the judge's voice cut through the murmurs, "you unlawfully detained a senior federal agent. Do you understand the gravity of your actions?" Decker blinked, stunned. Jade leaned forward, her voice cold and precise. "I warned you, but you didn't want to listen." The gavel slammed. "How did it come to this? Before we dive into the full story, let me know where you're watching from. If you stand for justice, hit like and subscribe for more powerful stories like this." Millfield was the kind of town that clung to its past like rust on an old chain. American flags, faded from years under the relentless sun, fluttered limply along Main Street. Mom-and-pop shops with peeling paint lined the sidewalks, their window displays unchanged for decades. The town had its own rhythm, slow, predictable, and fiercely resistant to anything or anyone that didn't fit its mold. In places like Millfield, history wasn't just remembered, it was enforced. Among the locals, familiarity bred comfort. Faces were known, routines were shared, and the unwritten rules of belonging were passed down like family heirlooms. Strangers stood out like cracks in the sidewalk, and Millfield had little tolerance for cracks. It was a place where people didn't just notice differences, they policed them. Officer Kyle Decker thrived in a town like this. In his Navy uniform, crisp and commanding, he patrolled the streets like a king surveying his domain. Decker had worn the badge for 15 years, not just to uphold the law but to shape it around his worldview. To him, the badge wasn't just authority, it was power. And power, in Decker's mind, belonged to men like him. He knew who belonged, in Millfield, and who didn't. He made sure those who didn't were reminded of it, often and without mercy. Minorities, outsiders, and anyone who dared to challenge the town's status quo found themselves at the wrong end of his scrutiny. Complaints had come and gone, but none had ever stuck. Decker was careful, always careful enough to stay within the bounds of plausible deniability. He'd learned long ago that the system was built to protect men like him. It was early morning when Decker began his patrol, the sun barely cresting the horizon. He sipped coffee gone cold an hour ago, his patrol car idling at the corner of Jefferson and Pine. The radio crackled with mundane updates, nothing worth his attention. He glanced at his watch, almost 8. School traffic was thinning, and the town was settling into its sluggish weekday rhythm. Decker thrived on routine, but not the kind that came with community service or helping kids cross the street. He liked the part of the job that reminded people who was in charge. His mood, already sour from a restless night, made him itch for someone to remind of that fact. That's when he saw her. The woman walked with purpose down the cracked sidewalk, her heels clicking softly against the concrete. She was tall, poised, and undeniably out of place in a town like Millfield. Dark skin glowing under the morning sun, she moved like someone who belonged, not just here, but anywhere she chose to be. A fitted navy blazer hugged her frame, and tailored slacks fell in sharp lines to polished shoes. Her hair, styled in tight curls, framed a face that held nothing but quiet confidence. She carried a sleek leather briefcase in one hand, the strap of her bag resting easily on her shoulder. Everything about her spoke of success, control, and self-assurance, the kind of demeanor that set Decker on edge. It wasn't just that she was black, it was that she didn't carry the weight of it, the caution he expected from someone like her in a town like this. She walked like she had every right to be there. Decker's grip tightened on the steering wheel. There was nothing illegal about walking down the street, not even in Millfield, but there was something about her that triggered his instinct for control. Confidence like that, especially from a black woman, always read to him as defiance. It didn't matter if she wasn't breaking the law. People like her thought they were above it, and that was enough for Decker. His eyes narrowed as she crossed in front of his cruiser, her gaze steady and uninterested in the patrol car watching, her like a predator sizing up prey. No one like her had business here, not dressed like that, not walking like she owned the place. Decker thumbed the radio, ready to call it in, but stopped himself. There was no reason to report this. She wasn't a threat to the town, but she was a threat to his authority. Decker tossed the empty coffee cup into the passenger seat and wiped his hand on his uniform pants. He flicked on the patrol lights, red and blue strobes slicing through the sleepy calm of the morning. The tires crunched against loose gravel as he pulled out from the curb, speeding up to catch her. The woman didn't flinch when the lights flashed in her peripheral vision. She slowed, then stopped, turning her head just enough to acknowledge the patrol car crawling beside her. Calm, controlled, unbothered. Decker hated that. He rolled down the window, his face set in a mask of professional indifference. "Ma'am," he called out, voice cool and sharp. "Stop right there." The woman halted, adjusting the strap of her briefcase. Her expression didn't shift. Not confusion, not concern, not even mild irritation. Just calm, unreadable composure, the kind of reaction Decker despised. He was used to hesitation, to stammered explanations, not this quiet certainty. It felt like a challenge, even if she hadn't meant it that way. "Is there a problem, officer?" Her voice was steady, polite, but completely unafraid. Decker's fingers twitched against the steering wheel. That tone, firm and even, rubbed him the wrong way. He didn't hear fear, he didn't hear deference, he heard someone who didn't believe she was under his control. "ID," Decker snapped, pushing the door open and stepping out. He loomed over her, 6 feet of polyester-clad authority. The woman didn't argue. She moved slowly, deliberately, mindful of how quickly situations like this could escalate. Her hand dipped into her blazer, and Decker's palm instinctively rested on his holster. He didn't draw, not yet, but the message was clear. One wrong move and this ends badly. She noticed. Her brows lifted slightly, almost amused as she pulled out a slim wallet and flipped it open. A Virginia driver's license sat beside a federal badge, Department of Justice, Senior Investigator Jade Bennett. Decker barely glanced at the credentials. He saw what he wanted to see, a black woman standing where she didn't belong, dressed like she owned the place, flashing what was probably a fake badge. His prejudice filled in the blanks faster than reason could catch up. "Never heard of." "Hugh," he muttered, shoving the wallet back at her. "This is a restricted area. Hands behind your back." For the first time, Jade's composure cracked, just a hairline fracture of disbelief, quickly smoothed over. She didn't resist, didn't argue. She just turned slowly, placing her hands behind her back as instructed. No struggle, no pleading. Nothing Decker could twist into justification later. Decker frowned, thrown off balance. He'd expected pushback, something to fuel his narrative. Her compliance irritated him more than resistance would have. Scowling, he snapped the cuffs tighter, then necessary, waiting for the inevitable flinch. It never came. "You're making a mistake," Jade said quietly as he led her to the patrol car. Decker laughed, short and bitter. "You people always say that." He shoved her into the back seat, ignoring the soft sigh she gave as she settled in. "Let's see what the judge thinks." As he walked around to the driver's side, Decker allowed himself a small, satisfied smirk. He'd done this 100 times before, and it always played out the same way. They argued, they demanded lawyers, they claimed discrimination, and in the end, it didn't matter. The system was on his side. It always had been. But something gnawed at the edge of his mind as he pulled onto Main Street. In the rearview mirror, Jade sat perfectly still, her gaze fixed straight ahead. No panic, no anger. Just calm acceptance, like someone watching the first act of a play they'd already seen to its bitter end. That was the moment Decker should have known this time was different. But he didn't. He just tightened his grip on the wheel. Irritation, simmering beneath his skin. By the end of the day, he thought, she'd learn who was really in charge, or so he believed. Decker's patrol car rumbled down Main Street, the red and blue lights still flashing as if to announce his authority to the quiet town. In the back seat, Jade Bennett sat with her wrists cuffed tightly behind her back, her posture rigid, but her expression calm. Decker kept glancing at her through the rearview mirror, expecting her to break the silence, to beg, to protest, to curse him out like so many others had. But Jade didn't move, didn't speak. Her stillness gnawed at him. "What's the matter?" Decker finally sneered, voice sharp with irritation. Nothing to say now, Miss High and Mighty? Jade's gaze didn't waver from the horizon outside the window. Nothing I say would matter to you, Officer Decker. You've already decided what you want to believe. The calm certainty in her voice hit him harder than any insult could. Decker's grip tightened on the wheel, knuckles whitening. He was supposed to be in control here. He was the law. And yet somehow the woman in the back seat, the one in cuffs, was making him feel like the one being judged. The courthouse loomed ahead, its white columns gleaming under the mid-morning sun. Decker didn't bother calling in the detainment. Why would he? It wasn't like she mattered. He'd booked plenty of people without paperwork before, just a quiet misunderstanding that got swept under the rug. Millfield's system protected its own, and Decker had always been on the right side of it. As he pulled into the courthouse lot, Decker glanced back again. Jade was watching him now, her dark eyes steady. There was no fear, no desperation, just quiet, unnerving composure. "Out!" Decker barked, yanking the door open and grabbing her arm. He pulled harder than necessary, satisfied when she stumbled slightly before regaining her balance with practiced ease. The cuffs bit into her wrists, but she didn't flinch. "You really think you're untouchable, don't you?" Decker hissed, his face close to hers. "That some fake badge gives you the right to walk through my town like you own it." Jade met his gaze without blinking. "It's not fake, Officer Decker, but you'll figure that out soon enough." Decker's jaw clenched. He didn't like her tone, not pleading, not angry, just patient, like she was waiting for him to catch up to a truth he couldn't see yet. He marched her through the courthouse, doors, ignoring the curious glances from clerks and bystanders. Inside, the air was cool and sterile, the hum of fluorescent lights filling the silence. Decker bypassed the booking desk entirely, leading Jade straight toward the small holding. "Area near the courtroom, booking can wait," Decker muttered half to himself. "Let's see what the judge thinks of your little act." Jade sighed quietly but said nothing. She didn't struggle, didn't speak, didn't give him anything to latch onto. It was infuriating. They reached the courtroom where Judge Hamilton was already on the bench, flipping through paperwork while a clerk whispered something in his ear. The judge glanced up, frowning when he saw Decker dragging Jade toward the front of the room. "Your Honor," Decker announced, chest puffed with authority. "This woman was found in a restricted area, refused to comply with my instructions. So I am bringing her in for processing." Judge Hamilton barely looked up. "Name?" Jade straightened her blazer as best she could with her hands still cuffed. "Jade Bennett." Decker's smirk widened. He was ready for the judge's dismissal, ready to watch the woman's calm shatter when she realized no one cared about her credentials. But the judge's pen froze mid-signature. His gaze lifted, sharp and calculating, locking onto Jade's face. "Jade Bennett?" he repeated slowly, his tone shifting from indifferent to cautious. Decker frowned. What was that look? Recognition? No, that didn't make sense. She was nobody. "Do you have any representation, Miss Bennett?" Judge Hamilton asked, voice unusually careful. Jade smiled faintly, her first real expression since the encounter began. "I won't be needing representation, Your Honor." Decker's smirk widened further. Perfect. Another fool who thought they could talk their way out of trouble. He crossed his arms, waiting for the inevitable pleading, the weak excuses. But the judge's expression didn't soften. If anything, it hardened. "Officer Decker," Judge Hamilton said, voice cold and precise, "let me see the charges." Decker stepped forward, pulling a small notepad from his pocket. He handed it over confidently, the vague citation of restricted, area and failure to comply scribbled in familiar shorthand. It had always been enough before. It would be enough now. The judge skimmed the page, his brows knitting together. He leaned back in his chair, studying Jade for a long moment before turning his gaze back to Decker. "Officer Decker," the judge said, his tone now dangerously calm. "Do you have any idea who this woman is?" Decker blinked, caught off guard. "Some civilian who thought she could go wherever she wanted," he muttered defensively. A soft chuckle escaped Jade's lips, the sound quiet but cutting. "Oh, officer," she murmured. "You really should. Do your homework." Before Decker could snap back, the judge tapped his gavel once, sharp and deliberate. "Jade Bennett," Judge Hamilton said, "is a senior investigator for the Department of Justice, a federal agent." The words hit Decker like a freight train. His breath caught, the smug grin wiped clean off his face. The room seemed to tilt slightly, the fluorescent light suddenly too bright, the polished floor too slick under his boots. What? That couldn't be right. No. She'd flashed a badge, sure, but anyone could buy a badge online. Anyone could fake credentials. That's not possible, Decker croaked, disbelief twisting his features. She didn't show real credentials. Anyone can flash a badge. Jade didn't flinch. She didn't need to. She simply lifted her cuffed hands and gestured toward her blazer. If you'd bothered to check the ID I handed you, you'd have seen the embedded DOJ serial number. But you didn't, Officer Decker. You saw my skin, not my badge. The judge's face darkened. Officer Decker, he said, voice like ice. Did you even verify her credentials before placing her under arrest? Decker hesitated. He could lie. He wanted to. But the courtroom cameras were running, the clerk's pen had stopped scratching against paper, and the gallery had gone completely still. Even the reporters in the back had lowered their phones, waiting for his answer. No, Your Honor, Decker muttered, jaw tight. He hated the taste of those words. The judge nodded grimly. Then you've not only violated departmental protocol, but also the civil rights of a federal agent. This is beyond negligence. This is abuse of power. Decker's face flushed crimson. He glanced at Jade, expecting her to gloat, to smirk, to enjoy his humiliation, but her expression remained neutral, almost tired. It wasn't personal for her. That somehow made it worse. Your Honor, Decker blurted, desperate to regain control. She was near a restricted area. That's probable cause. I was following standard procedure. Judge Hamilton's lips curled into something between a frown and a sneer. Probable cause? Walking down the street near a public courthouse? This is Millfield, Officer Decker, not a war zone. You had no reason to stop her, let alone arrest her. Decker opened his mouth to argue, but the judge raised a hand, silencing him. Enough. Remove the cuffs, now. For a moment, Decker didn't move. His fingers twitched near his belt. Releasing her felt like surrender, like admitting he was wrong in front of the very people who usually nodded along with his actions without question. Jade turned, presenting her wrists without a word. Decker fumbled with the key, the metal cuffs biting into his pride as much as her skin. The moment the cuffs clicked open, Jade rubbed her wrists, red welts visible against her dark skin. She didn't complain. She didn't have to. The evidence was right there for everyone to see. The judge leaned forward, eyes narrowing. Miss Bennett, do you wish to press charges? Decker's heart skipped a beat. If she said yes, it was over. Suspension, investigation, possible termination. He'd seen it happen before to others, never to him. He had always been untouchable, until now. Jade studied Decker for a long moment, then slowly shook her head. Not yet, Your Honor, she said quietly. I'd rather Internal Affairs handle this properly. I'm more interested in understanding how someone like Officer Decker feels empowered to operate this way without consequence. Decker's breath caught. Not yet. The words hung like a threat, soft but deadly. She wasn't letting this go. She was giving him rope not to escape but to hang himself. The judge nodded. Very well, Officer Decker. You are to stand down immediately. I will be notifying the department, and Internal Affairs will conduct a full review. Do not leave this courthouse until further notice. Decker stepped back, fists clenching at his sides. He'd walked into this courtroom ready to humiliate Jade Bennett, to strip her of her pride and authority. Instead, he stood exposed, powerless, drowning in the very system he had weaponized against others for years. Jade adjusted her blazer, smoothing the fabric as though brushing away the last remnants of his control. She didn't look at him again. She didn't need to. The judge banged the gavel, the sharp crack echoing in Decker's ears long after the courtroom began to empty. He stood there, breathing heavily, watching Jade walk out the doors without so much as a glance back. That should have been the end of it. A moment of reckoning, a lesson learned, but for Decker it wasn't over, not by a long shot. Humiliation curdled into something darker, something colder. She had embarrassed him, stripped him of authority in front of people who once feared him. And as Jade disappeared down the hall, heels clicking softly against the polished floor, Decker made a silent promise to himself. He wasn't done with Jade Bennett. Not yet. Comment number 1 if you believe Jade was right to stand her ground and expose Officer Decker's abuse of power. Like and subscribe if you believe accountability should always be enforced, no matter who wears the badge. But here's the real question. If Decker was willing to cross the line this easily, what do you think he'll do now that his authority has been publicly challenged? The courthouse doors swung shut behind Jade Bennett, the echo of the judge's gavel still ringing in the back of her mind. Outside, the sun was brighter than she remembered, almost blinding after the sterile, fluorescent-lit courtroom. She adjusted, her blazer, ignoring the raw redness around her wrists where the cuffs had bitten into her skin. This should have been the end of it. A corrupt cop exposed, a judge standing on the right side of the law, and her freedom restored. But Jade had been in this game long enough to know better. Men like Decker didn't lose quietly. Behind her, Officer Kyle Decker stood frozen, fists clenched at his sides, his face a mask of barely contained rage. He had come into the courthouse expecting to humiliate her, to strip her of her pride and authority. Instead, he'd been the one stripped bare, his abuse of power laid out for everyone to see. And worse, it had been at the hands of a black woman, who hadn't even raised her voice. Jade hadn't fought, hadn't argued, hadn't given him the satisfaction of resistance. She'd simply let the system, the very system Decker had relied on for years to protect him, turn against him for once. As the last few spectators filtered out of the courtroom, Decker stood rooted to the spot, his mind racing. This wasn't over. It couldn't be. He had built his career on control, on ensuring that people like Jade Bennett, confident, educated black, never forgot their place. And now she had walked out of the courthouse with her head held high while he stood there humiliated and powerless. No, he wouldn't accept it. Decker's hand twitched toward his radio, but he stopped himself. Calling it in meant paperwork. Paperwork meant scrutiny. And scrutiny was the last thing he needed right now. He needed to take care of this quietly. He stormed out of the courtroom, his boots pounding against the polished marble floor, his breath shallow and quick. He didn't even glance at the court clerk who watched him with a mixture of curiosity and thinly veiled satisfaction. They'd all seen it. They'd seen him lose. That was what burned the most. In the parking lot, Decker yanked, opened the door of his patrol car and slid behind the wheel, his fingers curling around the steering wheel until his knuckles turned white. His mind was a whirlwind of anger and calculation. He could have let it go, chalked it up to a bad day, a misunderstanding, and moved on. But that wasn't who he was. Decker didn't lose, and he sure as hell didn't lose to someone like Jade. Bennett. He grabbed his phone and dialed a number he knew by heart. It rang twice before a gruff voice answered. Vickers, the voice growled. Tom, I've got a problem, Decker muttered, staring out the windshield at the courthouse steps. Jade was nowhere in sight. A big one. Sergeant Tom Vickers had been Decker's unofficial backup for years, the kind of cop who didn't mind bending the rules as long as the right people stayed on top. He'd climbed the ranks by keeping things quiet. Complaints disappeared, investigations stalled, witnesses suddenly uninterested in testifying. Vickers thrived in the shadows, and Decker knew that if anyone could help him clean up this mess, it was him. What kind of problem? Vickers asked, his tone already edged with suspicion. Federal kind, Decker spat. Woman named Jade Bennett, DOJ investigator. I pulled her in for looking out of place, and now the judge is breathing down my neck. There was a pause. Then Vickers laughed, low and mean. You arrested a Fed without checking her credentials? Jesus, Decker, you're losing your touch. Decker's jaw tightened. I'm not asking for a lecture. I'm asking for backup. She's not walking away from this like nothing happened. Vickers sighed. You want this to disappear? Fine, I'll make some calls. But you'd better hope she doesn't start digging. If she sniffs around the wrong corners, you're not the only one going down. Decker didn't respond. He didn't need to. He'd already made his decision. Jade Bennett had embarrassed him, made him look weak. And there was one thing Decker hated more than anything: losing control. Jade, unaware of the storm brewing, behind her walked briskly down Main Street, her phone pressed to her ear. The call connected after 2 rings. "Corinne," Jade said, her voice steady despite the adrenaline still coursing through her veins. "It's done. He detained me, ignored my badge, and hauled me into court. Judge Hamilton shut it down." Agent Corinne Miles, Jade's direct supervisor at the DOJ, didn't sound relieved. "And Decker, what's his move now?" Jade sighed, glancing around. The streets of Millfield looked peaceful, too peaceful. A mother pushed a stroller past the bakery. An elderly man watered the flower boxes outside the hardware store. Everything looked normal, but Jade knew better. Small towns like this had a way of closing ranks when one of their own was threatened. "He's not the type to take this lying down," Jade admitted. "But he's exposed now. He'll think twice before trying anything stupid." Corinne's silence stretched a beat too long. "Don't underestimate men like him, Jade. They don't think twice. They double down. Get out of Millfield now." Jade hesitated. She'd come to Millfield for more than just Decker. The DOJ had been quietly investigating corruption within small-town police departments across the state, and Millfield had lit up like a Christmas tree during their preliminary sweep. Decker was just the tip of the iceberg. Beneath him was a network of officers who operated with impunity, hiding behind procedural jargon and small-town solidarity. If she left now, the investigation would stall. The victims, people too scared or exhausted to fight, would be left to suffer in silence. "I can't," Jade said finally. "Not yet. There's more here. I can feel it." Corinne cursed under her breath. "Damn it, Jade, fine, but stay sharp. If Decker's pissed, he won't come alone." "I always stay sharp," Jade replied, ending the call. She glanced at her watch. It was barely noon, but the day already felt endless. She needed to regroup, gather her notes, and contact Terrence Holloway, a local activist who'd been quietly collecting complaints against Millfield PD for years. If anyone had insight into how deep this corruption ran, it was Terrence. But first she needed to get back to her hotel. She'd barely taken 3 steps toward her car when she noticed the patrol cruiser parked across the street. The engine was off, but the silhouette behind the wheel was unmistakable. Decker. Jade's heart skipped a beat. He should have been drowning, in paperwork, facing down internal affairs, not sitting there watching her like a predator stalking prey. Their eyes met through the windshield, and Decker's lip curled into a slow, malicious smile. He didn't move, didn't speak. He just watched. Jade swallowed hard and turned away, forcing herself to walk calmly toward her car. Panic wouldn't help her now. If Decker was already tailing her, it meant only one thing. He wasn't backing down, he was escalating, and escalation always came with collateral damage. Jade Bennett kept her stride even as she walked toward her car, every nerve in her body screaming at her to move faster. Decker's cruiser remained parked across the street, his shadowed figure barely visible behind the windshield. He wasn't following proper procedure. He wasn't calling in a detainment, he was just watching, waiting, like a predator circling prey, enjoying the moment before the pounce. She unlocked her car with a quick tap of her key fob, slipped into the driver's seat, and started the engine. The patrol lights on Decker's cruiser flickered to life instantly, casting red and blue streaks across her windshield. Jade clenched her jaw, refusing to let him see any sign of unease. She'd faced bigger threats than an angry cop drunk on authority, but the difference was those threats hadn't worn a badge. Decker didn't move. He didn't need to. The message was clear. "I see you, I'm not done." Jade pulled out, keeping her speed exactly at the limit. Decker's cruiser followed. Close enough for intimidation, but far enough to avoid suspicion if anyone asked. He wasn't pulling her over this time. He was shadowing her, hunting. Her phone buzzed on the passenger seat. Corinne Miles, Jade hit. The hands-free button on the dashboard. "Tell me you're out of Millfield." Corinne's voice snapped through the speakers. "Not yet," Jade replied, eyes flicking to the mirror. Decker's patrol car stayed glued to her rear bumper. "Decker's tailing me, he's not even trying to hide it." Corinne cursed under her breath. "He's not stupid. He knows you're a federal agent. He's pushing boundaries because he thinks the system will protect him." Jade's grip tightened on the wheel. "It always has before. Get to a secure location." "Now," Corinne ordered. "I'll escalate this to internal affairs. They'll have his badge by tomorrow." Jade didn't share Corinne's confidence. Men like Decker didn't fall because of paperwork and protocol. They fell when someone pushed harder than they could, and Decker was already pushing. As she neared her hotel, Jade took a detour down a side street, watching Decker in the mirror. He didn't hesitate, didn't even try to make it look like casual patrolling. He followed, headlights glaring like eyes locked on a target. Jade made a decision. She wouldn't lead him to her hotel, not when everything she'd gathered, her notes, the reports, the recordings of previous encounters with Millfield PD, was sitting on her laptop inside. If Decker was this bold now, it wouldn't take much for him to cross another line. "Corinne," Jade said evenly, "he's not backing off. I'm heading to the field office in Brenton. It's an hour out, but federal jurisdiction is tighter there. He won't risk pushing it that far." "Good," Corinne replied. "Stay on the line. I'm tracking your location." Jade nodded. To herself, turned onto the highway and pressed her foot down, pushing the speedometer just past the limit. Behind her, Decker's lights flicked off. He wasn't leaving. He was escalating. 10 minutes outside of town, the flashing lights bloomed behind her, strobing against the darkening sky. Decker had finally made his move. Federal agent or not, Decker's voice crackled through her speakers as he activated his loudspeaker. "You're speeding." "Pull over now," Jade cursed under her breath. Corinne's voice buzzed in her ear. "Do not stop, Jade. I'm sending local backup to intercept." But Jade knew how this worked. Running, even from a corrupt cop, painted her as the aggressor. She had enough battles ahead without giving Decker ammunition. Her foot eased off the gas, and she pulled to the shoulder, heart pounding in her chest. Decker approached slowly, hand resting on his holster. Not drawn, not yet, but the threat was there, silent and unmistakable. He tapped the driver's side window with exaggerated patience. Jade rolled it down, her badge already in hand. "Senior Investigator Jade Bennett, Department of Justice," she said, her voice cool and steady. "This stop is unlawful. Step away from the vehicle." Decker didn't even glance at the badge. He smiled, slow and cruel. "Speeding's unlawful too, Agent Bennett." "Looks like neither of us is perfect." "Backup's on the way," Jade warned. "Walk away now, and this stays a suspension instead of termination." Decker leaned in, his face inches from hers. His breath smelled of stale coffee and something bitter. "Suspension? Termination? You really think paperwork scares me? This town protects its own, always has, always will." Jade held his gaze, refusing to blink. "That protection's running thin, Decker. The world's watching now." Decker's smile didn't waver. "Then let them watch." Before she could respond, the passenger door yanked open, and another officer, Ray Henson, one of Decker's usual lackeys, grabbed her arm, hauling her out of the car with practiced ease. "Out of the vehicle," Decker snapped, as though she'd resisted. "Hands where we can see 'em." Jade didn't fight. Fighting gave them an excuse. Her badge was still in her hand, glinting under the dying light. "You're making a mistake," she said again, voice calm but firm. "Funny," Decker sneered. "That's what you said last time." The cuffs clicked around her wrists, tighter than necessary, biting into skin already bruised from the first arrest. Decker leaned close, his lips almost brushing her ear. "This time, there's no judge watching," he murmured. Jade's heart pounded, not from fear but from cold, calculating fury. She wasn't the one trapped here. Decker was digging his own grave, one reckless act at a time. He just didn't realize it yet. Corinne's voice crackled faintly from the phone still sitting on the dashboard. "Jade? Jade? What's happening?" Decker reached in and ended the call with a satisfied click. "Looks like your lifeline just ran out." He shoved her toward the back of his cruiser, and Jade stumbled but didn't fall. She straightened, chin high, as Decker grinned like a man who'd already won. But Jade had one card left to play. "Body cam running, Decker?" she asked, her tone almost conversational. His grin faltered. "Must have glitched when I got the call." He lied easily. Jade's smile was razor sharp. "Lucky for me, mine didn't." Decker's eyes flickered to the small camera pinned to the lapel of her blazer. He hadn't noticed it in the heat of his smug triumph. Jade didn't wear a body cam out of habit. It wasn't standard issue for DOJ investigators. But after the first encounter with Decker, she'd known better than to walk around Millfield unprepared. For the first time, Decker hesitated. Just a beat. Just long enough for doubt to creep into the cracks of his confidence. "You're bluffing," he muttered, voice less sure now. "Try me," Jade replied coldly. The moment stretched, taut and silent. Then Decker's radio crackled. "Unit 12 status check, back up en route." Decker's jaw clenched. He knew the game was slipping out of his control. He could push further, risk everything, or cut his losses and retreat. But men like Decker didn't retreat. He grabbed Jade's arm, forcing her toward the back seat of the cruiser. "Let's see if that camera's still rolling when you're sitting in a holding cell." Jade didn't resist. She didn't need to. The camera was rolling, live streaming to a secure DOJ server. Every word, every movement, every abuse of power was being catalogued in real time. Decker had already lost. He just didn't know it yet. The door slammed shut behind her, and Decker climbed into the driver's seat, jaw tight with barely suppressed fury. The cruiser pulled onto the road, heading not toward the local precinct but toward the outskirts of town. "Where are we going, Officer Decker?" Jade asked, her voice steady despite the unease curling in her stomach. Decker didn't answer immediately. His eyes flicked to the rearview mirror, locking onto hers. "Someplace quiet," he finally said, "where no one's watching." Jade's pulse quickened. This wasn't about an arrest anymore. This was personal, dangerous. And if Decker was desperate enough to take her off the grid, he was desperate enough to do something irreversible. Comment number 1 if you believe Decker has already gone too far and needs to be stopped immediately. Like and subscribe if you think Jade was right to wear that hidden camera to protect herself. But here's the real question. Now that Decker is taking her somewhere off the record, can Jade outsmart him before it's too late? Or has she finally pushed him past the point of no return? The sun dipped lower as Decker's cruiser sped down the empty back roads of Millfield, the hum of the tires blending with the low crackle of the police radio. Jade sat rigid in the back seat, her wrists still cuffed, the sting of the metal digging into tender skin. The faint red light of her body cam flickered under the lapel of her blazer, still recording, still transmitting. But Decker didn't know that. Not yet. He hadn't driven her to the station. That much was clear when they bypassed the familiar streets of downtown and veered toward the outskirts. The road narrowed, the houses grew sparse, and the trees loomed, taller, casting long shadows across the cracked asphalt. This wasn't protocol, this was personal. Jade's mind raced. Decker wasn't just trying to arrest her anymore, he was trying to disappear her. She'd seen it before in cases she'd investigated. Traffic stops that ended in resisting arrest. Suspects found hours later in holding cells, bruised and silent, if they were found at all. But she wasn't just another name on Decker's list, and she had no intention of becoming one. "You know this won't end well for you, Decker," Jade said, her voice calm despite the fury building inside her. "The DOJ already has eyes on you. This little detour is just adding fuel to the fire." Decker didn't answer immediately. His jaw was set, knuckles white against the steering wheel. Finally, he spoke, voice low and bitter. "Eyes don't mean anything when there's no one left to talk. Cameras glitch, files disappear. You'll be just another name on a report no one reads." Jade's stomach tightened. He wasn't bluffing. He believed every word. And worse, he'd done it before. The thin blue line of silence, the brotherhood, that protected men like him was already closing ranks. She was no longer just an inconvenient outsider. She was a threat to his power, his pride, his control. And threats, in Decker's world, were eliminated. The radio crackled again. "Unit 12 status check, Officer Decker, report." Decker ignored it, his lips curling into a twisted smile. "Guess they'll wonder why I went dark. Maybe I'll say you jumped me, reached for my gun. It's happened before." Jade's breath slowed. She couldn't afford panic. Panic got people killed. She shifted slightly, testing the cuffs. Tight. Too tight. But her focus wasn't on the restraints. It was on the phone still lying on the cruiser's dashboard, the screen dim but active. If she could just reach it. The car jolted as Decker swerved off the main road onto a narrow dirt path leading into the woods. The tires kicked up dust, the trees closing in around them like silent witnesses. This was it. He wasn't even pretending anymore. Jade leaned forward slightly, her voice steady. You're risking everything for what? Pride? Ego? Do you really think your buddies at the station will cover for this? Decker laughed, short and sharp. Cover for me, they'll thank me. You're not just some mouthy civilian, Bennett. You're a Fed. You're a wrecking ball aimed at everything we've built here. You think Millfield runs on justice? It runs on control. My control. The word hung in the air, heavy and undeniable. Control. That's what this had always been about, not law, not order. Just raw, unchecked power wielded by a man who'd never been told no. Jade's gaze flicked to the phone again. One chance. She shifted her weight, feigning discomfort. Fine, she muttered. You win. Just loosen the cuffs at least. My wrists are bleeding. Decker glanced at her in the mirror, suspicion flickering across his face. But arrogance, as always, clouded his judgment. He thought he'd broken her, that she was bargaining because she'd given up. Bleeding, huh? He smirked, reaching into his belt for the cuff key. Should have thought about that before you mouthed off to the wrong cop. The car slowed as he pulled off into a clearing, tires crunching over dried leaves. For a moment, everything was silent, except for the soft tick of the cooling engine. Decker threw the cruiser into park and stepped out, boots thudding against the ground as he rounded the vehicle. Jade's breath came slow and controlled. Fight or flight? Neither. Not yet. She had one more play. As Decker opened the door and yanked her out, the phone on the dashboard buzzed. An incoming call. Corinne. Decker didn't notice. His focus was on Jade, his grip bruising her arm as he pulled her toward the edge of the clearing. Last chance, Bennett. You can disappear quiet or I can make it loud. Your call. Jade didn't blink. Loud then. Before Decker could react, she shifted her weight and drove her shoulder into his chest, knocking him off balance. He stumbled, cursing, and Jade used the moment to twist her wrists, feeling the metal bite deeper but loosening ever so slightly. The phone. That was her target. Decker recovered fast, faster than she'd hoped. His hand shot to his holster and Jade froze, heart hammering. He wouldn't, would he? Not with her badge, her ID, her entire existence proving she wasn't just another civilian. But the look. In Decker's eyes wasn't calculation. It was pure animalistic rage. He was past logic, past reason. This was personal now. You think you're smarter than me? He snarled, gun half drawn. You think that badge makes you untouchable? Jade didn't answer. Words were useless now. She darted sideways, the cuffs cutting deeper as she moved, her foot catching the edge of the cruiser's bumper. The phone was still buzzing, Corinne's name flashing on the screen. Decker lunged, Jade twisted, falling hard against the hood, breath rushing from her lungs. But her fingers brushed the phone, just enough to tap the screen to answer the call. Bennett? Corinne's voice crackled through the speaker, sharp and urgent. Jade, where are you? Decker froze. His eyes flicked to the phone. Realization. Dawning too late, Millfield, back road, south clearing. Jade gasped, voice strained but clear. Officer Decker, armed. Unlawful detainment. Decker's face twisted with fury. He slapped the phone away, sending it skidding across the dirt. But the damage was done. Corinne had heard. Backup was coming. For the first time, uncertainty flickered across Decker's face. His grip on the gun tightened, then loosened. He glanced around the clearing. The isolation that had once been his advantage now felt like a trap. You just signed your death warrant, he growled. Jade stood, slowly, blood trickling from her wrists, chin high despite the ache radiating through her body. No, Decker, you did that the moment you put those cuffs on me. The distant wail of sirens cut through the silence, faint but growing louder. Decker heard them too. His eyes darted to the tree line, the road, the cruiser. No escape, no backup. Just him, exposed and cornered. Get on the ground, Decker, Jade ordered, her voice cold and authoritative. You're done. For a moment, she thought he might comply. His hand hovered near his holster, indecision written across every tense line of his body. But men like Decker didn't surrender. They didn't accept defeat, not when the system had always bent in their favor. Decker stepped back, shaking his head slowly. This isn't over, Bennett, he muttered, not by a long shot. Then, without another word, he turned and ran into the woods, the trees swallowing his figure as the sirens grew louder. Jade didn't move. She couldn't chase. Him, not like this. Bleeding, bruised, wrist still cuffed. But she didn't need to. The DOJ was coming. They'd find him. And when they did, there'd be no hiding behind the thin blue line. The sirens screeched to a halt at the edge of the clearing, doors flying open as federal agents poured out, weapons drawn. Corinne was the first to reach her, eyes wide with relief and fury. "Jesus, Jade," Corinne breathed, unlocking the cuffs with quick, practiced movements. "Are you okay?" Jade nodded, flexing her sore wrists. "Better than Decker's gonna be." Corinne's gaze flicked toward the woods, where agents were already spreading out, flashlights cutting through the dark. "He won't get far. We'll find him." Jade exhaled slowly, the adrenaline finally ebbing, leaving behind exhaustion and a simmering anger that refused to fade. "Find him fast," she muttered, "because if he's desperate enough to run, he's desperate enough to do something worse." Corinne nodded grimly, squeezing Jade's shoulder before turning back to bark orders at the search team. The night swallowed their voices as Jade stood in the clearing, bruised but unbowed. Decker was out there, and men like him didn't go down quietly. This wasn't the end, it was just the beginning of the hunt. The clearing buzzed with activity as federal agents fanned out, their flashlights flickering like fireflies against the darkening forest. Jade Bennett stood at the edge of the chaos, her wrists now free but raw from the too tight cuffs Decker had slapped on her. The cool evening air did little to soothe the burning skin. Beside her, Corinne Miles barked orders into her radio, her jaw set in a hard line. "Perimeter's locked down," Corinne muttered, lowering the radio. "They'll find him. He's on foot. No car, no support. He's got nowhere to run." Jade nodded, though the tightness in her chest didn't ease. Men like Decker didn't need support. They thrived in the shadows, in the cracks of the system they'd manipulated for years. He wouldn't go down quietly. She could feel it, an itch beneath her skin that no amount of logic could dismiss. A young agent jogged over, breathless. "Ma'am, we found tire tracks leading to a side road, about 50 yards from the clearing. Looks fresh." Jade's heart sank. Of course Decker had planned for this. He'd never expected to get caught, but he'd always had an exit strategy. She could practically hear his smug voice in her head. "You don't last this long without knowing when to cut and run. Pull the dashcam footage from his cruiser," Jade ordered, already moving toward the dirt path where the tracks led. "If he made a call, I want to know who picked him up." Corinne fell into step beside her, boots crunching over dried leaves. "You think someone's helping him?" Jade's smile was humorless. "I think Decker never does anything alone. He's too smart for that. And if someone was willing to cover for him after the courthouse fiasco, they're willing to help him now." The radio on Corinne's belt crackled. "Negative on visual. Suspect not in immediate vicinity. Continuing search." Corinne cursed, under her breath. "He's slipping through our fingers." Jade's mind raced. Decker was running, yes, but he wasn't running blindly. He was regrouping, planning. The look in his eyes before he bolted wasn't fear. It was fury. Humiliation curdled into vengeance. He wasn't just trying to escape. He was planning his next move. Her phone buzzed in her pocket. Unknown number. Jade froze. Corinne noticed, her hand drifting instinctively toward her sidearm. "Who is it?" Jade didn't answer. She stepped away from the noise of the search party and swiped to answer, pressing the phone to her ear. "Bennett." Silence. Then a low chuckle. Familiar. Cold. "Decker. Miss me already, Agent Bennett." His voice was smooth, devoid of the earlier rage. That made it worse. He wasn't cornered. He was confident. Jade's fingers curled into a fist. "You're done, Decker. Every agency in the state is hunting you. You won't make it out of Millfield." Decker laughed again, the sound hollow and sharp. "Funny, that's what I was about to say to you." Jade's spine stiffened. "What are you talking about?" "Look around, Bennett," Decker continued, his tone almost conversational. "Who do you think runs this town? You think the DOJ scares anyone here? You're the outsider, the threat, and threats get neutralized." The line went dead. Jade stared at the phone, heartbeat thundering in her ears. He wasn't bluffing. He was planning something bigger, something that didn't just end with him escaping. He wanted payback. Corinne stepped closer, eyes sharp. "What did he say?" Jade swallowed hard. He's not running. He's retaliating. As if on cue, the police radio clip to the nearest agent crackled to life. All units be advised. Shots fired near the Millfield Community Center. Possible officer down. Suspect matching Decker's description seen fleeing west. Jade's blood ran cold. The community center, the place where Terence Holloway, the local activist collecting complaints against Millfield PD, held his meetings. The same Holloway Jade had planned to meet the next morning to discuss the evidence she'd gathered. "Terence," Jade whispered, already moving. "He's going after the people helping us," Corinne swore, grabbing her arm. "Jade, wait, you're the target here. He's baiting you." "Exactly," Jade shot back. "And if we don't move now, someone else pays the price." Jade sprinted toward her car, ignoring the shouts of federal agents behind her. She didn't have time for backup, not when Decker was already shedding blood to make his point. She jumped into the driver's seat, the engine roaring to life as she peeled out. Onto the main road. Her phone buzzed again. Another unknown number. This time she didn't hesitate. "Bennett," she snapped. "You're fast," Decker drawled, "but not fast enough. Holloway's already on the ground, breathing for now. Maybe I let him live. Maybe I don't. Depends on how quickly you get here." Jade's hands tightened on the wheel. "If you touch him, you'll what?" Decker cut in, voice sharp. "Arrest me? We both know that's not happening. You think the badge you're so proud of means anything here? It doesn't. You're fighting a system designed to protect me, and the more you push, the more it'll push back." The tires screeched as Jade took a sharp turn, headlights slicing through the darkness. The community center was only 5 minutes away. 5 minutes that could mean the difference between life and death. "You don't scare me, Decker," Jade said coldly. "Maybe not," he replied, "but you should be scared for the people around you. You made this personal, Bennett. Now it's your turn to lose." The call ended. Jade's heart pounded in her chest, the weight of responsibility crashing down on her. This wasn't just about her anymore. It never had been. Decker wasn't fighting for survival. He was fighting for dominance. And the only way to win was to break the people standing in his way. Jade slammed on the brakes as she reached the community center, tires skidding across the pavement. The building was dark, except for a flickering streetlight casting long, jagged shadows. No sign of Decker. No sign of Terence. Her phone buzzed. A text. One word. "Inside." Jade didn't hesitate. She drew her sidearm, heart pounding, and moved toward the entrance. The door was ajar, swinging slightly in the breeze. She pushed it open, the creak echoing like a scream in the silence. Inside, the main hall was empty, chairs overturned, papers scattered. And there, near the stage, Terence Holloway lay motionless, one hand clutching his side, blood seeping between his fingers. "Terence!" Jade rushed forward, dropping to her knees beside him. His eyes fluttered open, pain etched into every line of his face. "Bennett," he rasped. "Decker, he's not done." Jade's breath caught. "Where is he?" Terence coughed, wincing. "Said, this was just the beginning." The lights flickered. Jade's instincts screamed. She grabbed Terence's arm, hauling him. Set to his feet despite his protests. "Can you walk?" she demanded. "Barely," Terence muttered, "but I'm not dying here." They stumbled toward the exit, every step agonizingly slow. Jade's eyes darted around, searching for movement, for the glint of a gun barrel, for anything that screamed trap. They made it to the door. Fresh air, safety, almost. And then, from the shadows across the street, Decker's voice rang out. "Leaving. So soon, Agent Bennett." Jade froze, shielding Terence behind her. Decker stood beneath the flickering streetlight, gun raised, his face twisted in a mockery of a smile. "You really thought it'd be that easy?" he sneered. "You humiliate me, tear down everything I've built and walk away untouched. No, Bennett, you don't get to win." Jade raised her weapon, voice cold and steady. "Drop the gun, Decker. This ends now." Decker's smile widened. "You keep saying that, but you're missing the point. It doesn't end, not until someone loses." For a moment, the world held its breath. 2 figures, 2 guns, 2 lives hanging in the balance. Comment number 1. If you believe Jade should take the shot and end Decker's reign of terror once and for all, Like and subscribe if you think there's still a way to bring him down without bloodshed. But here's the real question. With Decker cornered and desperate, how far will he go to protect the power he's already lost? And can Jade stop him before more innocent lives are caught in the crossfire? The night air hung thick with tension as Jade Bennett stood between Terence Holloway and Officer Kyle Decker, her sidearm leveled with unflinching precision. The flickering streetlight above cast jagged shadows across the pavement, the glow illuminating Decker's twisted smile as he held his gun steady, aimed directly at Jade's chest. "Lower the weapon, Decker," Jade ordered, voice ice cold. "It's over." Decker's smile widened, teeth glinting in the dim light. "Over?" he mocked, head tilting like he couldn't believe what he was hearing. "Nothing's over, Bennett. Not until I say it is." Terence, still clutching his side where blood seeped through his shirt, stumbled behind Jade, barely keeping himself upright. "He's not bluffing," he muttered through clenched teeth. "This man's got nothing left to lose." And that was what made Decker truly dangerous. He wasn't acting as a cop anymore. He was a man stripped of authority, pride, and control, the very things that had defined his existence. Now all he had left was spite. "I don't think you understand the situation," Decker continued, taking a slow step forward, gun unwavering. "You think that badge makes you powerful? Out here, it's just a piece of tin. Out here, the system protects men like me, not outsiders like you." Jade didn't move. Her breath was slow, controlled, her finger resting lightly on the trigger. She'd been in standoffs before, but this was different. Decker wasn't negotiating. He was buying time, calculating his next move. Her mind raced. Backup was still minutes away, minutes she might not have. The phone call to Corinne had gone through, but Decker wasn't acting like a man expecting reinforcements to arrive. He was acting like someone with a backup plan already in motion. "Don't do this, Decker," Jade said, voice firm but measured. "You shoot me, you're done. No department, no union, no brotherhood will cover for you after this." Decker's eyes flickered with something dangerous. Amusement? Defiance? "You really don't get it, do you, Bennett?" He stepped closer, lowering his aim just slightly like a predator circling wounded prey. "I'm already done. My badge? Worthless. My reputation? Gone. But you're still standing, still breathing. And that's what pisses me off the most." The gun shifted, now aimed squarely at Terence, who stumbled back, eyes widening in horror. "Step aside, Agent Bennett," Decker sneered, "or I'll start with him." Jade's heart pounded, the moment stretching into unbearable silence. Her training screamed at her to act, but Decker was too close, too fast. If she moved, someone would die, and then it clicked. Decker wasn't trying to escape. He was trying to destroy everything Jade had fought to protect, the people, the evidence, the truth. This wasn't about survival. It was about erasure. If he couldn't win, he'd burn everything down with him. Jade's voice dropped, cold and cutting. "You think killing him changes anything? You think it erases what you've done?" Decker's grip on the gun tightened. "It erases you." The word you barely left his lips before Jade moved. In one fluid motion, she pivoted, grabbing Terence by the arm and pulling him down as she squeezed the trigger. The sharp crack of gunfire shattered the night. Decker flinched, stumbling back, as Jade's shot grazed his shoulder, spinning him sideways. His own weapon discharged, the bullet splintering the wooden post behind where Jade had stood a second earlier. "Run!" Jade shouted at Terence, shoving him toward the alley beside, the community center. He didn't argue. He staggered into the shadows, one hand pressed to his wound, while Jade turned her full attention back to Decker. The officer's face twisted with fury and pain as he clutched his bleeding shoulder. "You just made the last mistake of your career, Bennett." Jade didn't lower her weapon. "You already ended your career, Decker. I'm just making sure you don't take anyone else down with you." Decker's hand twitched toward his radio, but Jade was faster. "Don't," she warned, her tone sharp enough to slice through the tension. "One more move and I drop you right here, right now." For the first time, uncertainty flickered across Decker's face. He was losing control of the situation, and men like him didn't handle that well. His eyes darted around, searching for an out, but the sound of approaching sirens drowned out the silence of the night. Backup Finally. Decker's lips curled into a bitter smile. You think those sirens mean you won? He spat. They don't. They never do. Jade didn't respond. She didn't need to. The flashing red and blue lights reflected off the nearby windows as federal SUVs screeched to a halt at the curb. Doors flew open and agents poured out, weapons drawn, shouting commands. Drop the weapon, now! For a moment, Decker stood frozen, his gun still half raised, eyes darting between Jade and the agents closing in. His pride, his ego, everything that had defined his life was crumbling around him. He could surrender and face the humiliation of being dragged away like a common criminal, or he could go out swinging. He chose the latter. With a defiant roar, Decker swung his gun back toward Jade, but she was already moving. Her training kicked in, instinct overriding thought. One shot center mass. Decker staggered, eyes wide with shock as the impact drove him backward. The gun slipped from his fingers, clattering to the pavement. He crumpled to his knees, gasping for breath as the reality of his defeat settled in. The agents swarmed, shouting commands Jade barely registered. She stood rooted to the spot, gun still raised, heart pounding in her chest. The threat was neutralized, but the weight of the moment bore down on her like a physical force. Decker coughed, blood staining his lips as he glared up at Jade, defiance still burning in his eyes despite the inevitability of his downfall. You think this ends with me? He rasped, voice ragged and weak. You're fighting shadows, Bennett. Cut off one head, 2 more grow back. Jade didn't flinch. Then I'll cut them off too. The agents closed in, cuffing Decker's limp hands behind his back as paramedics rushed forward. He didn't struggle. He didn't have the strength left. The fight was over, for now. Corinne appeared beside Jade, breathless and wide-eyed. Jesus, Jade. Are you okay? Jade nodded, lowering her weapon, the adrenaline finally giving way to exhaustion. I'm fine. Terrence. Paramedics are with him, Corinne confirmed. He'll live, thanks to you. Jade exhaled slowly, the weight in her chest easing slightly. But Decker's final words echoed in her mind, chilling her to the core. You're fighting shadows. Cut off one head, 2 more grow back. This battle was over. But the war had just begun. And Jade Bennett wasn't backing down. Not now. Not ever. The flashing red and blue lights painted the community center in harsh, jagged shadows as Decker lay motionless on the pavement, paramedics working around him. Jade Bennett stood frozen, gun lowered, but still clenched tightly in her hand, heart pounding in her chest. The threat was neutralized, but the uneasy weight of Decker's final words lingered like smoke after a fire. You think this ends with me? You're fighting shadows, cut off one head and 2 more grow back. Corinne Miles appeared beside her, breathless and tense. Jade, she urged, voice sharp with urgency. You okay? Jade nodded, though she didn't feel okay. The adrenaline was wearing off, leaving behind exhaustion and a gnawing dread. Decker's down. Terrence? Corinne gestured toward the far side of the lot, where paramedics were loading Terrence Holloway into an ambulance. His face was pale, blood still seeping through his bandages, but he managed a weak nod in Jade's direction. He'll make it, Corinne confirmed. Thanks to you. Jade exhaled slowly, the tightness in her chest easing for the briefest moment. But it didn't last. Her gaze shifted to the perimeter of officers standing guard, their faces hard and unreadable. Some were federal agents, but more than a few wore the familiar uniforms of Millfield PD, Decker's department. His allies, one of them, Sergeant Tom Vickers, stood with arms crossed, watching the scene with a cold, calculating gaze. He didn't look shocked. He didn't look concerned. If anything, he looked expectant. Jade's stomach twisted. The system protects its own. Corinne, Jade muttered, voice low and urgent. We need to secure the evidence, now. Decker wasn't working alone. Corinne frowned. Jade, Decker's done. He's in custody and IA's already flagged his file. This is over. Jade's jaw tightened. You really believe that? Look around. She gestured subtly toward the Millfield officers, standing, in clusters, whispering among themselves. None of them looked rattled, none looked surprised. They looked like men regrouping after a lost skirmish, not a lost war. Corinne followed her gaze, face darkening. Damn it! You think Vickers was covering for him? Jade nodded. Vickers, maybe more. Decker wasn't smart enough to set this up alone. He was muscle, not the mastermind. Someone higher up gave him cover, someone with enough pull to make... Sure, complaints vanished and body cam footage got corrupted. As if to confirm her fears, Vickers' radio crackled. He listened, nodded once, then spoke quietly into the mic clipped to his shoulder. Jade couldn't hear the words, but the way his lips curled into a faint smile told her everything she needed to know. Decker was down, but the system was already. Closing ranks. Jade's phone buzzed in her pocket. She glanced at the screen. Unknown number. Her pulse quickened. Not again. She stepped away from the crowd, thumb hovering over the answer button. She didn't want to pick up. Every instinct screamed trap, but she couldn't ignore it. Not after everything. Bennett, she answered, voice sharp. Silence. Then a familiar rasp. Told you, Decker's voice croaked, weak but laced with bitter satisfaction. Cut off one head. Jade's blood ran cold. How the hell are you calling me? You're in custody. A low chuckle broken by a pained cough. You think cuffs mean anything? You think the system you're so proud of works for you? It doesn't. It never has. IA, DOJ, your shiny badge, they're nothing compared to what's really running this town. Jade's grip tightened on the phone. Who's pulling the strings, Decker? Vickers? Someone higher? Give me a name. Another. Cough wetter this time. Why would I do that? Decker rasped. Are you already lost, Bennett? You just don't know it yet. The line went dead. Jade stared at the screen, heart hammering. This wasn't over. Not even close. Jade! Corinne's voice snapped her out of it. We've got a problem. Jade! Spun around to see Corinne holding her phone up, face pale. The evidence locker at the station, someone accessed it 10 minutes ago. Clearance codes came from the captain's office. Jade's breath caught. Captain Doyle, the man who'd stayed eerily silent throughout the investigation, the man who'd overseen every internal review of complaints against Decker and his circle, he'd been invisible, untouchable, until now. They're wiping. The files, Jade realized, the words bitter on her tongue. Every complaint, every report, every piece of evidence tying Decker to the system, they're scrubbing it clean. Corinne cursed. I'll get a team to the station. No. Jade's voice was sharp, decisive. They'll see us coming. We need to move quiet now. Without waiting for permission, Jade sprinted toward her car, Corinne hot on her heels. The scene behind them blurred into irrelevance. Agents processing Decker, officers murmuring in dark corners, Terrence's ambulance pulling away. None of it mattered if the evidence disappeared. Without proof, Decker's arrest was just noise. The system would reset, adapt, and continue unchecked. As they sped toward the Millfield PD headquarters, Jade's mind raced. This wasn't just about Decker anymore. This was about every officer who'd covered for him, every superior who'd looked the other way, every bureaucrat who'd prioritized loyalty over justice. The corruption ran deeper than she'd feared, and she'd just kicked the hornets. Corinne gripped the dashboard, eyes flicking between Jade and the dark road ahead. You realize what you're doing, right? If we go in without authorization, it's our badges on the line. Jade's smile was grim. If we don't, it's everyone else's lives on the line. Decker might be the face, but the system is the body. Cut it down now or it grows back stronger. They screeched to a halt outside the precinct, lights off, adrenaline spiking. The building was quiet, too quiet. No patrol cars idling out front. No officers milling around on break. Just dark windows and the faint hum of fluorescent lights inside. Jade's phone buzzed again. Another text. Turn back now. Last warning. No name, no number. She showed it to Corinne, who swore under her breath. They know we're coming. Good, Jade muttered, stepping out of the car and drawing her sidearm. Let them know. I'm done playing defense. They moved quickly, sticking to the shadows as they approached the side entrance. Corinne tapped into her DOJ credentials, bypassing the main security system. The lock clicked open, and they slipped inside, the stale air heavy with tension. The evidence room was on the second floor. Every step up the narrow stairwell felt like an eternity, each creak of the old wood amplifying the risk. But when they reached the landing, they froze. Two officers stood guard outside the evidence room, Millfield PD, not Federal, Vickers men. Jade exchanged a glance with Corinne. No time for subtlety. "Federal agents," Jade barked, stepping into way. The light, badge held high. "Step away from the door now." The officers hesitated, hands twitching toward their holsters. One, Officer Henson, Jade recognized as one of Decker's usual shadows. His lip curled in disdain. "Under whose authority?" Henson sneered. "This is a local matter." Corinne stepped forward, voice sharp as steel. "Under federal jurisdiction, evidence related to an ongoing investigation. Interfere, and you're obstructing justice." The second officer, younger and less sure, glanced nervously at Henson. "Man, I don't think this is worth it." Henson's eyes darted between Jade, Corinne, and the badge in Jade's outstretched hand. For a moment, Jade thought he might stand down. Then, with a muttered curse, Henson stepped aside, hands raised in mock surrender. "Your funeral agent." Jade didn't respond. She pushed past, swiping her ID to unlock the evidence room. The door clicked open, revealing rows of shelves and file cabinets. But the locker where the federal evidence should have been was open. Empty. Corinne cursed. They got here first. Jade's gaze swept the room, mind racing. No hard drives, no folders. Nothing tying Decker or his allies to the complaints they'd buried for years. It was like the investigation had never happened. Her phone buzzed again. Another text. "Told you, you lose." Jade's breath came fast and sharp, not fear, fury. The system was fighting back, harder and faster than she'd anticipated. This wasn't just about Decker anymore. This was about power, the kind that didn't flinch under scrutiny because it had never faced true accountability. "Jade," Corinne muttered, voice tight. "What now?" Jade didn't hesitate. "We find Captain Doyle. He ordered the evidence cleared. He's the next link in the chain." Corinne's eyes widened. "You really want to take on the captain of an entire department without backup?" Jade's smile was cold. "I don't want to. I have to." Comment number one if you believe Jade is right to keep pushing, even if it means going up against the entire department. Like and subscribe if you think the corruption runs deeper than anyone realized. But here's the real question. With the evidence wiped and Decker's allies circling, how can Jade prove the truth before the system buries her next? Is it already too late for justice? The empty evidence locker stared back at Jade like a silent declaration of war. The hard drives, the case files, the complaints, everything tying Decker to the system he served was gone, erased, like it had never existed. The only thing left was the cold hum of the fluorescent lights overhead and the hollow ache of knowing they were losing ground, fast. Corinne Miles stood frozen beside her, jaw tight, fists clenched at her sides. "Damn it," she muttered, voice laced with fury. "We were minutes too late." Jade didn't move. Her mind raced through the possibilities, connecting dots that hadn't seemed important before. Decker had been reckless, arrogant, but not strategic. He was muscle, not a mastermind, but someone had moved quickly, almost too quickly, to clean up his mess. Someone with enough authority to override federal clearance and enough influence to mobilize officers without raising alarms. "Doyle," Jade said quietly, the name like acid on her tongue. Captain Doyle ordered the evidence cleared. Corinne's head snapped toward her, eyes narrowing. "You sure?" Jade nodded, lips pressed into a grim line. "He's the only one with that kind of pull. Decker was the enforcer, but Doyle's the architect. He's been covering for Decker and his circle for years, and now he's covering his own tracks." Corinne cursed under her breath. If Doyle's running cleanup, he's not doing it alone. He's got the department behind him. We can't take on an entire precinct without backup. Jade's gaze didn't waver. Backup's compromised. If Doyle's calling the shots, every officer under his command is a potential threat. We don't need an army. We need proof. Something Doyle can't erase. Corinne hesitated, then nodded slowly. His office. If he ordered the purge, the authorization logs will be on his terminal. If we can get the access logs, we can tie him directly to the cover-up. Jade didn't waste time. "Then we move, now." They slipped out of the evidence room, moving quickly and quietly down the dimly lit hallway. The precinct was unusually silent for this time of night. No officers chatting at the front desk, no idle chatter from the bullpen, just the low hum of electronics and the faint creak of old floorboards beneath their feet. "Too quiet," Corinne muttered, hand drifting toward her sidearm. "They know we're here." Jade's pulse quickened. "Let them know. We're not here to play nice." They reached the administrative wing, where the captain's office sat like a fortress at the end of the hall. The door was closed, blinds drawn, but the faint glow of a computer monitor seeped through the cracks, and the red light of the security panel blinked steadily beside the handle. Jade glanced at Corinne. "You cover the hall. I'll get us inside." Corinne nodded, drawing her weapon and positioning herself at the corner, eyes sharp and focused. Jade moved to the panel, pulling out her DOJ-issued override key. It wasn't technically sanctioned for this kind of operation, but technicalities had gone out the window the moment Decker dragged her into the back of his cruiser. The key slid into the panel with a soft click. The light flickered from red to yellow, then green. The lock disengaged with a quiet hiss. Jade pushed the door open, gun raised. "Doyle," she called, voice steady and authoritative. "Federal agent, hands where I can see them." Silence. The office was empty. No Doyle. No signs of struggle. Just an immaculately organized desk, a half-empty cup of coffee gone cold, and the soft hum of a computer screen still logged in. Jade moved fast, holstering her weapon and sliding into Doyle's chair. "Corinne, door. Now." Corinne stepped, inside, shutting the door behind her and locking it with a quick flick of the latch. "Hurry, we're on borrowed time." Jade's fingers flew across the keyboard, pulling up the system logs, clearance codes, timestamps, authorization entries, everything the precinct had done in the last 24 hours. Her heart skipped, a beat when she saw the entry she'd been dreading. Evidence purge initiated. Captain Doyle, timestamp 2247. Backup disabled. Firewall override, authorized by Captain Doyle. "There it is," Jade muttered, snapping a quick photo of the screen with her phone. He didn't just order the purge, he bypassed the federal backup system. He knew exactly what he was doing. Corinne leaned over her shoulder, eyes narrowing. "That's obstruction of justice. If we get this to IA, Doyle's finished." Jade's relief was short-lived. Another entry appeared, fresh and blinking. A live command from Doyle's terminal, remote system wipe initiated. 30 seconds until full data purge. Jade's breath caught. "He's wiping the entire server." Corinne's face hardened. "We need that data, Jade. Without it, it's our word against his." Jade didn't hesitate. She pulled a flash drive from her pocket, standard DOJ issue. Encrypted and self-executing, she slammed it into the USB port, fingers moving with practiced precision. 15 seconds, Corinne warned, eyes flicking toward the hallway. "We've got movement," Jade gritted her teeth. "Almost there." The screen flickered as the drive's auto backup kicked in, copying every relevant log, every deleted file, every piece of metadata Doyle had tried to bury. The progress bar crawled forward, agonizingly slow. 10 seconds, Corinne snapped, raising her weapon as footsteps echoed down the hall. "We need to move." The progress bar hit 95%, 97, 99, complete. Jade yanked the flash drive free just as the screen flashed red, the system collapsing under the weight of its own purge. Everything Doyle had tried to hide was now in her pocket, small enough to fit in the palm of her hand, but powerful enough to bring down an empire of corruption. "Got it," Jade hissed, standing so fast the chair toppled behind her. "Out!" Now, Corinne swung the door open, gun raised. The hallway was no longer empty. 3 officers stood at the far end, Millfield PD, not federal, and at the center of them, calm as ever, stood Captain Doyle. He didn't look surprised. If anything, he looked amused. "Evening, Agent Bennett," Doyle drawled, arms crossed over his broad chest. "Late night?" Jade didn't flinch. "Step aside, Captain. You're obstructing a federal investigation." Doyle's smile didn't waver. "Funny. From where I'm standing, you're the one breaking and entering. Corinne's gun didn't move. "We have the logs, Doyle. Your clearance codes, your purge order, it's over." Doyle sighed, almost theatrically. "Is it? You have a flash drive. I have an entire department loyal to me. You really think IA's going to take your word over mine?" Jade's heart pounded, but her face remained cold, unreadable. "This drive's already uploading to a federal server. Every keystroke, every log, every deleted file. Even if you kill us right here, right now, the truth's already out." Doyle's smile faltered. Just a flicker, but enough. The advantage was gone, and he knew it. "Stand down, Doyle," Jade ordered, voice sharp. "This ends tonight." For a moment, the hallway hung in perfect silence, the tension stretched to its breaking point. Then slowly, Doyle raised his hands, palms out. "Smart play, Agent Bennett," he muttered. "Smarter than Decker, I'll give you that." Behind him, the officers hesitated, uncertainty flickering across their faces. The power dynamic had shifted, and in law enforcement, loyalty only extended as far as survival. One by one, they lowered their weapons, backing away from the captain they'd once followed without question. Doyle's face hardened. "You really think this changes anything?" he sneered. "Decker was a pawn. I'm replaceable. The system adapts. It always does." Jade didn't blink. "Then I'll keep cutting until there's nothing left to grow back." The sound of federal sirens cut through the night, closing in fast. Doyle's expression didn't change, but the resignation in his eyes told Jade everything she needed to know. He'd lost, and he knew it. Corinne stepped forward, cuffs in hand. "Captain Doyle, you're under arrest for obstruction of justice, conspiracy to commit fraud and tampering with federal evidence. Hands behind your back." Doyle didn't resist. He simply smiled, cold and knowing, as the cuffs clicked shut around his wrists. "This isn't over, Bennett," he muttered as they hauled him away. "You're fighting shadows. You'll never win." Jade watched him go, heart pounding in her chest. Maybe Doyle was right. Maybe the system would adapt, rebuild, and find new faces to wear old masks. But tonight, at least, the shadows had thinned, and she wasn't done fighting. Not yet. Not ever. The flashing lights from federal cruisers cast jagged shadows across the Millfield PD parking lot as Captain Doyle was hauled away, his face frozen in a mask of bitter resignation. Jade Bennett stood motionless, hand still hovering near her holstered sidearm, heart pounding as the weight of the moment settled over her. Doyle was down, the flash drive with every incriminating log secured in her pocket. It should have felt like victory. It didn't. Corinne Miles stepped up beside her, breathless but steady. "Doyle's in cuffs. Evidence is backed up on the DOJ server. We got him, Jade." Jade's jaw tightened. "We got one head, the body's still moving." Corinne frowned. "What do you mean?" Jade didn't answer immediately. Her eyes scanned the precinct's facade, noting the silhouettes of officers lingering near the windows. None of them moved to intervene. None stepped forward to support Doyle. But they weren't scattering either. They were waiting, watching. The system protects its own. "Decker said it himself," Jade muttered, voice low. "Cut off one head. 2 more grow back. Doyle didn't move this fast without help. There's someone else pulling strings." Corinne's face darkened. "Who?" "IA's already sweeping the precinct. Every terminal, every locker." Jade's phone buzzed in her pocket. She pulled it out, heart sinking as she read the message flashing across the screen. Unknown number. "You really thought Doyle was the top? Cute. Turn around, Agent." Her blood ran cold. Slowly, instinctively, she turned. Across the lot, standing in the shadow of an unmarked black SUV, was a man Jade hadn't expected to see outside of a press conference. Sheriff Landon Carr, the highest-ranking law enforcement official in the county. Decker's boss, Doyle's boss. Carr didn't move. He didn't need to. His arms were crossed, face unreadable, but the slight curl of his lips betrayed quiet satisfaction. Like a man watching pawns move exactly where he'd expected. Corinne followed Jade's gaze, eyes widening. "The sheriff? No way. He's the one who called in federal oversight when Decker was exposed." Jade's grip tightened on the phone. "Because it let him control the narrative. While we were chasing Decker and Doyle, Carr was cleaning house, on his terms." The SUV's engine hummed to life. Carr held Jade's gaze for a beat longer, then climbed into the back seat. The tinted windows swallowed him whole as the vehicle rolled slowly out of the lot. No lights, no urgency. Just quiet, deliberate retreat. Corinne swore under her breath. "He's running." Jade shook her head, already moving toward her car. "No, he's consolidating. Doyle was the fall guy. Carr's protecting the real network, the one keeping men like Decker in power." Corinne hesitated. "Jade, we've already stretched jurisdiction. IA's barely covering us as it is. Going after Carr without a warrant? That's career suicide." Jade stopped, turning to face her partner. "You think careers matter when people like Carr weaponize the system? When they erase lives with a stroke of a pen or a lost report? If we don't end this now, we'll be cleaning up after them for years, if we're even allowed to." Corinne stared at her for a long moment, then exhaled sharply. "Damn it, I hate when you're right. Let's go." They jumped into Jade's car, tires screeching against the asphalt as they sped after the SUV. The streets of Millfield were eerily quiet, most of the town already asleep, unaware of the power struggle unfolding in the shadows. Jade kept her eyes locked on the taillights ahead, her mind racing. Sheriff Carr wasn't running. He was regrouping, heading somewhere secure, somewhere he could make calls, erase records, and tie up loose ends. And Jade Bennett had no intention of being one of those loose ends. The SUV took a sharp turn down a side road, heading toward the outskirts of town. Jade's pulse quickened. "He's not going home. That road leads to the old training facility." Corinne nodded, pulling out her phone. "I'll call for backup." Jade reached over, pressing the phone down. "No, this stays quiet. If Carr still has allies in dispatch, we'll be walking into a trap. We end this clean," Corinne muttered, something under her breath but didn't argue. They drove in silence, headlights off, shadowing the SUV at a distance. When Carr's vehicle finally rolled through the rusted gates of the abandoned training ground, Jade pulled to a stop, just outside the perimeter. The facility was a relic from the 90s, a half-renovated compound once used for tactical drills, now little more than cracked pavement and graffiti-tagged walls. But it had one advantage Carr was clearly counting on: isolation. They moved fast, sticking to the shadows as they crossed the yard. The SUV sat idling near the main building, headlights, casting long, jagged beams across the cracked asphalt. No movement inside. Jade gestured toward the side entrance, and they split up, Corinne circling left while Jade hugged the right wall, gun drawn, footsteps silent against the concrete. Her breath came slow and steady, every nerve on edge. The side door was ajar. Too easy, too obvious. Jade didn't hesitate. She slipped inside, weapon raised, eyes adjusting to the dim interior. The space was mostly empty, save for a few overturned chairs and an old desk cluttered with files and an open laptop. And standing beside it, phone pressed to his ear, was Sheriff Landon Carr. Jade didn't wait. "Drop the phone, Sheriff. Hands. Where I can see them." Carr didn't flinch. He ended the call calmly, setting the phone down and turning to face her, arms raised, expression almost bored. "Agent Bennett," he drawled. "Can't say I'm surprised." "Step away from the desk," Jade ordered, voice like steel. "You're under arrest for obstruction of justice, conspiracy to commit fraud, and aiding and abetting corruption. Threatened a federal investigation." Carr chuckled, shaking his head slowly. "Big words. You sure you can back them up without Doyle to pin it on?" "I've got the clearance logs," Jade snapped. "Doyle authorized the purge, but the orders came from your office. You cleaned house while we chased ghosts. It's over." Carr's smile didn't fade. "Over? Agent Bennett, you're standing in an abandoned building pointing a gun at the highest-ranking lawman in the county. No warrant, no backup. Do you really think anyone's going to believe your word over mine?" Jade's finger tightened on the trigger. "I don't need belief, I have proof." Carr's eyes flickered to the laptop. The screen glowed with an open command prompt, active remote access. He hadn't been wiping files, he'd been pulling them. Every case Decker had touched, every complaint Doyle had buried, every payout, every falsified report. It was all there. Planning. "Your exit strategy," Jade sneered. "Blackmail files, leverage to stay one step ahead." Carr's smile thinned. "Insurance agent. The same system you're so proud of? It eats whistleblowers alive. I didn't build this game. I just learned how to play it better than the rest. Playtime's over, Jade snapped. Step away from the laptop. For the first time, Carr hesitated. His gaze flicked to the laptop, then back to Jade, calculating, weighing his options. And Jade saw it, the flicker of decision in his eyes. He lunged. Jade fired. One shot, clean and precise, catching Carr in the shoulder and spinning him sideways. He crashed into the desk, knocking the laptop to the floor. The screen blinked once, then died. "Stay down," Jade barked, advancing with careful, measured steps. Carr groaned, hand pressed to his bleeding shoulder, but he didn't fight. The power dynamic had shifted, and he knew it. Behind her, footsteps echoed. Corinne burst through the side door, gun raised, eyes wide as she took in the scene. "Sheriff Carr," Jade said coldly. "You're done. Hands behind your back. Now." Carr glared at her, breathing ragged. "You think this changes anything?" "The system adapts, Bennett. It always does." Jade stepped closer, eyes cold. "Then I'll keep cutting until there's nothing left to grow back." She snapped the cuffs around his wrists, the final click echoing like a gavel falling in an empty courtroom. Outside, the first rays of dawn crept over the horizon, casting long shadows across the cracked pavement. Carr was in custody. The files were secured. The network was exposed, but Jade knew the fight was far from over. The system didn't die quietly. It fought, adapted, and found new faces to wear old masks. But tonight, at least, one more piece of that corrupt machine had been ripped away, and Jade Bennett wasn't done fighting, not now, not ever. The first light of dawn broke over Millfield as Sheriff Landon Carr sat slumped against the overturned desk, blood seeping from the gunshot wound in his shoulder. The cold metal of handcuffs bit into his wrists, and the faint sound of approaching. Sirens grew louder, closing in like the inevitable tide. Jade Bennett stood over him, weapon lowered but eyes sharp, adrenaline still coursing through her veins. Corinne Miles moved in beside her, breathing heavily, gun still drawn. Her gaze flicked between Carr and the dark screen of the laptop, now lying on the floor. "Tell me you got the files," she muttered, voice taut with exhaustion and hope. Jade nodded, pulling the flash drive from her pocket. "Got everything, every order, every falsified report, every payout." Carr didn't just cover for Decker and Doyle. He built the system they operated in. Carr coughed, grimacing as he shifted against the desk. "You think flashing that little drive around changes anything?" His voice was hoarse, edged with bitter defiance. "You can't burn down an institution built to protect itself." Jade crouched to his level, eyes cold and unyielding. "You're right. The system protects its own. But when you rip out the foundation, the whole house of cards collapses. You were the foundation, Carr, and now you're done." The sheriff's lips curled into a sardonic smile despite the pain. "Am I? You think the brass in the State House didn't know, didn't benefit? I was convenient, replaceable. They'll hang me out to dry, sure, but by the time you finish your paperwork, someone else will be sitting in my chair, running the same playbook with a new face." Jade didn't blink. "Then I'll keep cutting them down, one by one." The sirens crescendoed as federal vehicles screeched to a halt outside the compound. Doors slammed, voices barked orders. The night's quiet shattered under the weight of the system finally turning against itself. Corinne stepped away to flag the incoming agents, while Jade stood over Carr, heart pounding. This should have felt like victory. It didn't. The sheriff wasn't panicked. He wasn't begging or bargaining. He was waiting, and that made Jade's blood run cold. "Where's the backup?" she demanded, stepping closer. "Doyle covered. For Decker. You covered for Doyle. Who's covering for you?" Carr chuckled weakly. "You really don't get it, do you? There is no top, just layers. You peeled one back, and now you think you've exposed the root. But roots run deep, Agent Bennett, deeper than you'll ever reach." The door burst open, and federal agents flooded in, weapons raised. "Federal jurisdiction," one shouted. "Drop your weapon and step back." Jade stood slowly, hands raised. "I'm DOJ. This man's in custody, charged with conspiracy, obstruction, and abuse of power." She nodded toward Carr. "Call it in. Every agency, every channel. No private comms. I want a federal transport, not local." The lead agent, a tall man with a hard-set jaw, nodded once. Copy that, we've got him. 2 agents moved in, hauling Carr to his feet. He winced but didn't resist, his face settling into an expression of resigned amusement. As they led him away, he glanced back at Jade, eyes gleaming with quiet certainty. "This doesn't end here, Bennett," he called over his shoulder. "You think you've won? You've just made yourself the next target." Jade didn't respond. She didn't need to. The truth was already out, spreading through encrypted servers and federal networks faster than any cover-up could contain. The flash drive in her hand wasn't just evidence, it was leverage, insurance, a shield against the system's inevitable retaliation. Corinne reappeared, face tight. IA's sweeping the precinct. They've already pulled Vickers and the officers who stood guard outside the evidence room. But guess what? Half the senior staff cleared out before we even called it in. Someone tipped them off. Jade's stomach twisted. "Carr," she muttered. "He made the call while we were chasing Doyle. This was never about saving himself. He knew he'd fall. He was clearing the board for the next players." Corinne ran a hand down her face, exhaustion etched into every line. "So what now? We've got the files, the arrests, the confessions. We should be celebrating, but it feels like we're still losing." Jade exhaled slowly, the weight of the night pressing down like an iron yoke. "We don't celebrate. We keep pushing. Get the files to Holloway at the DOJ office. Make it public. If the system adapts, we expose every adaptation until there's nothing left to rebuild." Corinne nodded grimly. "And if they come after us?" Jade's smile was cold, determined. "Let them. They've already lost the element of surprise." The agents secured the scene, and paramedics loaded Carr into the back of an ambulance. Jade watched in silence. The sheriff's earlier words echoed in her mind. "You've just made yourself the next target." Good. Let them target her. It meant they were running out of places to hide. Her phone buzzed again. Another unknown number, another message, short and chilling in its simplicity. "TikTok agent. You cut 1 head. 2 more already grew back." Jade stared at the screen, heart steady despite the implied threat. She didn't flinch, she didn't look away. Instead, she typed a single response. "Then I'll cut those 2. See you soon." Sliding the phone back into her pocket, Jade turned toward the dawn breaking over Millfield. The night's battle was won, but the war against corruption didn't end with handcuffs and flash drives. It would continue, relentless and unforgiving, until the entire system either collapsed or changed for good, and Jade Bennett was ready for every fight to come. The sun was fully up by the time the last of the federal agents cleared the training compound. Sheriff Landon Carr was gone, hauled off in a government SUV, his shoulder hastily bandaged, his arrogant smirk finally wiped clean. But the echo of his words lingered like smoke after a fire. "You cut 1 head. 2 more already grew back." Jade Bennett stood at the edge of the cracked pavement, eyes fixed on the horizon as the early morning light washed over Millfield. Exhaustion pulled at her limbs, but she couldn't afford to rest. Not yet. Not when the system was already adapting, shifting like a snake shedding its skin. Corinne Miles approached quietly, her phone pressed to her ear. "Yeah, got it. We're en route." She hung up, expression tight. Holloway's team secured the precinct. IA's sweeping the offices now. They found backup servers Doyle and Carr thought they'd erased. The flash drive's been mirrored across DOJ networks. This evidence, it's airtight. Jade nodded, her grip tightening around the flash drive still in her pocket. Good. But airtight doesn't mean untouchable. Carr was right. This goes beyond him. There's someone higher up, someone with enough reach to keep this cycle spinning. Corinne blew out a breath, rubbing her temple. "You really think state officials were in on it?" Jade's smile was grim. "I don't think I know. Decker, Doyle, Carr, they were foot soldiers. The real power sits in boardrooms and offices, behind desks where no one questions the paperwork. We didn't expose the system. We exposed its front line." Her phone buzzed again. Another unknown number. Jade didn't hesitate this time. She answered, voice cold and steady. "Bennett." Silence. Then a smooth, measured voice. Not Carr's, not Decker's. Someone older, more polished. "Agent Bennett, you're persistent. I'll give you that." Jade's heart slowed, instincts sharpening. And you are? A chuckle. No one you'll ever meet in a courtroom, but you've made enough noise to reach my desk. That's impressive, if misguided. Jade glanced at Corinne, who was already pulling out her own phone, tracing the call. If you're calling to threaten me, you'll have to get in line. I'm running out of patience for cowards hiding behind phones. The voice didn't waver. Not a threat, a proposal. You've done what few manage. You destabilized a network that took years to build. That's inconvenient, but not irreversible. Walk away now, and you'll keep your career, your badge, your life. Push further. You won't like what happens next. Jade's lips curled into a cold smile. That's the best you've got? Intimidation? I've already taken down your foot soldiers. Your turn's coming. A pause, then quietly. You think you're fighting for justice, Agent Bennett, but justice is just the illusion we sell to keep people like you busy, while the real players stay protected. You can't win. Jade's voice was ice. Watch me. The line went dead. Corinne looked up from her screen, frustrated. Burner. Phone. Signal bounced through 3 towers. Can't trace it. Jade pocketed her phone, jaw tight. Doesn't matter. They're scared enough to make contact. That means we're close. Corinne hesitated, then sighed. Jade, we've already taken down a sheriff and half his department. The DOJ's stretched thin. If we go after whoever's pulling the strings at the state level, we're not just pushing jurisdiction, we're declaring war. Jade's gaze didn't waver. It was always a war, Corinne. We just stopped pretending it wasn't. By the time they reached the Millfield precinct, the place was swarming with federal agents. Officers once loyal to Carr stood in handcuffs, heads down, while IA investigators hauled boxes of shredded documents and corrupted hard drives out of the evidence room. The thin veneer of authority that had shielded Millfield's corruption for years was gone, stripped bare for everyone to see. Terence Holloway, his side still bandaged from the gunshot wound he'd taken earlier, stood near the front steps, arms crossed. His face, usually quick to smile, was hard and unreadable. Bennett, he greeted, voice rough. Hell of a night, Jade nodded. It's not over. Holloway studied her for a long moment, then sighed. I figured you'd say that. IA's pulling every case file tied to Doyle and Carr, cross-referencing payouts and closed complaints. It's bad, Jade, real bad. This precinct was ground zero, but the paper trail, it leads up, not down. Jade's expression didn't change. How far up? Holloway hesitated. State-level oversight committees, campaign donors, judicial appointments, the kind of people who never touch a patrol car, but decide who gets to drive one. Corinne swore softly. So we didn't just pull weeds, we uncovered the root system. Jade's hand drifted to the flash drive in her pocket. Then we burn it down. Holloway shook his head. It's not that simple. This isn't just a precinct scandal anymore. It's political. Federal prosecutors are already getting calls from state officials pushing for context and leniency. They're closing ranks. Jade's smile was razor sharp. Then we don't go through the system. We go around it. Holloway blinked. What does that mean? Jade pulled out her phone and opened the encrypted cloud storage app. Every file from the flash drive, every complaint Doyle had buried, every order Carr had falsified, it was all there, waiting. We go public, she said quietly. Full disclosure, press, advocacy groups, watchdog organizations. We flood the system with so much sunlight they can't cover it up without exposing themselves. Corinne's eyes widened. Jade, if you do that, you're not just burning your career. You're putting a target on your back. The DOJ doesn't like rogue agents, even when they're right. Jade met her gaze, steady and unwavering. The system tried to bury me. The moment Decker slapped those cuffs on my wrists, I'm still standing. If they want to come for me, let them, but they'll have to do it in the daylight. Holloway exhaled slowly. You're serious? Dead serious, Jade replied. This doesn't end with indictments and press conferences. It ends when the people running the show can't hide behind bureaucracy anymore. Corinne nodded, a reluctant smile tugging at the corner of her lips. Well, hell, if we're going down, might as well make it spectacular. Holloway chuckled, shaking his head. You're both insane, but you're right. Let's finish this. Jade didn't wait. She tapped the screen, selected every file, and hit share. Within seconds, the truth was out. Emails, financial records, falsified reports, case closures marked insufficient evidence. Everything Doyle, Carr, and their unseen masters had fought to protect was now in the hands of people who didn't answer to state committees or police unions. The system had adapted, shifting to protect itself. But it had underestimated Jade Bennett. She hadn't been fighting to save her badge. She'd been fighting to burn down the rot that hid behind it. Her phone buzzed one last time. Another unknown number. Another message. "You just declared war. Hope you're ready for the consequences." Jade smiled, pocketing the phone. "I've been ready." The sun climbed higher, casting long shadows across the broken precinct. Somewhere, powerful men were realizing they'd lost control of the narrative. And Jade Bennett, she was already walking toward her next fight, unflinching, unstoppable, because the system might adapt, but so could she. And this time, she wasn't fighting alone. The story of Jade Bennett isn't just about one woman standing against corruption. It's a stark reminder of how systemic racism and abuse of power thrive, not just through individuals like Decker, Doyle, or Carr, but through an entire structure designed to protect itself. The system doesn't rely on brute force alone. It survives through silence, complicity, and the fear of retaliation. Jade's fight exposed more than crooked cops. It revealed how deep corruption runs when those in power prioritize control over justice. Every erased complaint, every falsified report, every silenced voice wasn't just a glitch in the system, it was the system working exactly as intended. But Jade's resilience proved one powerful truth. The system only wins if people like her give up, if they choose survival over accountability. Her victory didn't come from her badge or title. It came from persistence, from allies like Corinne and Terrence who refused to back down, and from the countless victims whose stories finally saw daylight. Jade didn't just fight for herself. She fought for everyone who'd been told to stay quiet, to accept injustice as inevitable. But the fight isn't over. As long as power remains unchecked and accountability remains optional, the cycle continues. True justice requires vigilance, courage, and the collective refusal to let corruption go unchallenged. Now, here's the real question. If the system itself is designed to protect those who abuse power, how do we hold it accountable? Is exposing individuals like Decker and Carr enough? Or does the real battle lie in dismantling the structures that protect them? Comment your thoughts below. Do you believe systemic change is truly possible? Like and subscribe if you stand for justice and believe stories like Jade's deserve to be heard. Thank you for watching, for caring, and for refusing to turn away. Stay safe, stay vigilant, and remember, silence is complicity, but speaking up, that's power. See you in the next story.